Hi everyone and welcome to the 44th episode of Praticamente Inglese. Hope you're doing well, guys. Hope you had a great weekend. Today I will be interviewing another great person to tell us a little bit more about the startup world. He will be with us in a few seconds. I just wanted to say something before we start with today's episode. I'm going to switch in Italian as you will listen to almost 45 minutes of interview in English. So let's have a little chat in Italian and then I will introduce you today's guest. Ciao a tutti e bentornati a Praticamente Inglese. Questo è il 44esimo episodio, insomma ne abbiamo fatti un bel po', devo dire. Sono contento, mi raccomando, continuate a seguire Praticamente Inglese un po' ovunque, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Se volete supportare il podcast potete farlo su Patreon. E ci facciamo anche due chiacchiere in inglese insieme. È un buon momento insomma per incontrare tutti i supporters del podcast e ne sono veramente molto contento. Questa settimana, tra parentesi, ho partecipato a una conferenza, una tech conference tutta online che si chiama Collision. È stata fantastica, ho avuto la possibilità di poter vedere CEO di grandi compagnie, ma personaggi anche molto molto importanti sia nel mondo dell'imprenditoria digitale, ma sia anche dello show business. E quindi devo dire è stata molto molto bella, e l'episodio di oggi deriva anche da questo momento che abbiamo del digitale, che la pandemia ha un po' spinto all'estremo, dove tutti stiamo facendo un po', trasformando le nostre vite intorno al digitale, e quindi intervisterò Davide Leonetti, che è uno start-upper molto molto bravo. L'ho incontrato su Clubhouse, ci siamo subito trovati e volevo presentarvelo perché ha veramente tante cose da dirci. In più gli chiederò anche qualche consiglio su come migliorare il nostro inglese e come far sì che questo inglese diventi sempre più fluente. In più volevo anche ricordarvi che ovviamente di seguire il podcast su tutte le piattaforme che ascoltate regolarmente, quindi in funzione di quella che è la vostra piattaforma preferita, di iscrivervi, così potete ricevere le notifiche ogni volta che posterò e posto il nuovo episodio settimanale. Bando alle ciance, I would like to introduce you Davide Leonetti, and I hope you will enjoy today's episode. Hi Davide, how's it going?
Hi Mattia, so excited to be here today. Thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here on your podcast.
That's great, David, and thanks for for being with us today. I would like to talk about startups. There's a big thing about the startup world. And when I used to live in London, and was a big thing in London, the startup world. Everyone wanted to be an entrepreneur and start something new, solve a problem, mainly in the digital world. But, I would like to know a little bit more about it. So if you want to introduce yourself to my audience, Davide, that would be great.
Yeah, sure, Mattia. Thanks. So I'm Davide Leonetti, and I'm the co-founder of Visafy, which is a startup headquartered in the south of Italy in the province of Bari. So really sunny normally. Today it's a gloomy day, but normally it's wonderful weather here. And a fun fact, I co-founded Visafy with my dad. So it's me and my dad running the company. And what we do is digitizing the consular visas. And for those of you who are not familiar with consular visas, they're basically travel authorization for entering countries that your passport normally does not have access to. So, for example, for Italians, those destinations would be United States, China, Russia. So normally the EU, you can enter them with your passport. But for those countries, you need a specific authorization, which is called a visa. And that's what we do on a daily basis.
So you look after all the process to get this visa, so the people that can travel to USA, to Russia, to China, right?
Right, and for a variety of cases. So let it be for tourism purposes, or for work purposes, or other many different cases.
Right. So Visafy is a startup, So you've been through all the process on, how to start a startup, and how to, how to work on that and make sure that this will end it up in a positive way, let's say. I hope that you can share some of your experience about, founding a startup. And the first thing I would like to know is, what is a startup? If you can just explain it to us.
That's a great question, Mattia, because there's a lot of misunderstandings going on around this term, and specifically in Italy, when Italians use this term. First of all, let's kick out the optimism. So the fact that startups are going to end well, because what we know is that 90% of startups fail within their first year of operation. So startups are a very risky business. But this depends actually on the definition of a startup. So I'll try to shed some light and tell you a little bit more about the definition of a startup. We definitely have several accepted definitions, let's say, but if we look at the origin of the word, let's say in English, starting something up has different meanings. So for example, you can start up your car, or, I'm a F1 fan. So you can start up an F1 car, or you can start up a plane, for example. So it basically means starting something. So starting from the beginning, right? Or turning something on in the case of a plane in a normal setting. But when it comes to business, we have a problem here because we have a lot of definitions. But one that I really like, it's this one. A startup is an early stage company searching for a scalable, repeatable, and profitable business model. So that tells you there that in the beginning, a startup does not know if their business model is profitable. So whether costs are less than revenues so they can make a profit. If it's repeatable, meaning that after having found a small group of people to whom I can offer my service, is it possible that other people in the market have the same need? And can I repeat my offer to all of those people? And third, it's the scalable parameter, which is very interesting. And it's mostly where the innovation, let's say, comes into play. So the scalability means, I'd like to describe it as offering your service to a number of people, and every people that you offer your service to requires less work than the previous one. So for your first user, you have a lot of work to do, but for your 100,000th user, you basically need no work to do. So that's the concept of scalability. And we haven't touched innovation yet, but as I said, it's an interplay of these three parameters.
So let me recap that. You mentioned that, the scalability of a startup is like, if I have, more sales because I have more clients, but the costs are really low after a certain point. So that's the, what everybody is aiming to, of course, because you're going to get money, but your costs are really low. And this is like, I assume you have to predict that with a business plan. Am I right?
Well, that depends, because when you first start up a company, if it's like a startup where you're in an uncertain phase, it's hard to do that because you may also not know who your customers are or who your long-term customers will be. Let's take as an example Airbnb, right? So the people that were the first users of Airbnb are much more different than the people who are now generating profits for Airbnb. So more often, startups they figure out on their way who their customer is. So it's very hard to predict it in the beginning. But you're completely right. You're like there's a nice quote that I'm going to use now. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So most of the time, your plan will be wrong, but the fact that you planned it helps you recover from that failure. And we can introduce another term now, pivoting. So
pivoting, yeah,
it's really used in the startup world, which it represents a big change in the startup, which can be, for example, a market pivot. So you're trying to attack another market than the first one you started with, or also the type of customer, let's say. Or you can also change your product. So you first were offering a product and then you realize that it doesn't work. So you want to offer something else. That's called a pivot. And it's used also in Italian.
Pivoting, fare pivot.
Pivoting, yeah. So coming back to your question, business plans, I'm not a fan of business plans, but if by business plan we mean how the startup does business, this is highly dynamic throughout the course of a startup, because the startup starts to realize that maybe that customer or that product is not so profitable and not so scalable, so they pivot, right?
But let me tell you this. So I understood that here in Italy is very important, the business plan, because you can have this business plan and you can bring it to the bank, so they can kind of see what's in your mind. I don't know if this is something that you are familiar with. I'm sure you are. But you said you're not a fan of the business plan. Why?
Yeah. So this is a wonderful question. And, we could start a new episode on this.
Okay.
Business plan is one of the points, especially in Italy, where you have a contrast between the new world and the old world. So in Italy, most of the times, although this is changing, I should admit, banks are not suitable for startup financing for a variety of reasons that I will not go into. But one of the main reasons is because banks do not understand startups, right? So they're trying to judge a startup based on a business plan, but they don't know that the business plan is the worst way to judge a startup, at least in my view, right?
Right.
And as I told you, I'm not a fan of the business plan because of the high uncertainty that there is in a startup. So I think every startup should have a business plan, because, business plan entails the term plan. So as I said, planning is really important because it's a mental process that helps you, map the processes and the structure of your business. But this should not, let's say, be a constriction to stick to that plan, right?
Right. Okay.
It's highly dynamic, and you should do it as an exercise as a founder, but then you kind of have to throw it away. You can use it to describe your company to an external party for sure. But if that party comes from the real startup world, they know that it is just a temporary plan of what you think the startup is going to be. But for example, a bank, they're going to try to judge you based on that. But if your startup is so innovative and you're trying to create a new market, let's think about Facebook going to a bank, an Italian bank, and say, I want to build a social network in 2008, 2007, when Facebook was...
2004 or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's when they founded it, but 2008 was really expanding. But they were well-founded at that point. But let's imagine 2008, in the midst of a global recession, Mark Zuckerberg, on a trip in Italy, went to a bank and said, can you please finance my startup? I'm trying to build a social network. And imagine him bringing the business plan, and the bank would be, I don't understand anything about this. Like, what's a post? What's a feed? So that's why I think it does not work. But it's changing. So banks are getting in the process of understanding startup and supporting them. But the main problem, as I said, is the risk of the startup. So banks want, in most cases, to finance those businesses that are reliable and are certain, and the startups are not. So there's a mismatch between the two.
So actually, you said about, the business plan, you told us about the banks and the system in Italy, which is, I think, different. It's a different system compared to California, let's say, right? Completely different, but we're getting there, and I really hope that this will be the case. My question is, so if you want to find money to fund your startup, you then need to go to an investor, an angel, and a VC, those kind of terms, you know. I don't know. I'm not clear. It's not clear to me. I don't know if you can just tell me a little bit more about, if I'm not going to a bank, then where do I have to go?
Sure. Yes, it's a wonderful topic, which we can sum up with a word, which is fundraising. And we use this word in Italian as well. And the word is basically composed of two subwords. So fund and raising, which means raising funds. And raising funds means finding money, let's put it this way, for your startup. So it's financing, basically. And it's not a new concept, because our traditional businesses already have financing, but different types of investors. So clearly, an investor is somebody who invests in your company. And in a startup, we have different types of investors for different stages of a startup. So normally you would be in what also the Italians, but mainly the Americans call early stage, which means you're in the initial phase of your startup, right? And you're probably trying to, let's put it this way. Not all startups have this standard structure that I'm going to describe. But that's the idea of a normal structure of a very innovative and scalable company. And you would have what's called a pre-seed phase. And you're trying to raise the pre-seed round. A round is basically every time you try to raise money for your company. So you have a pre-seed round, then you have a seed round, and then after that, we have what's called Series A, Series B, Series C, and so on and so forth. So basically,
qui la dobbiamo dire in italiano, secondo me, prima di andare avanti. Cioè, tu dici giustamente, ho bisogno di soldi, devo trovare investitori che mi diano capitali, no? E quindi c'è un pre-seed, che è una prima ricerca di soldi, per intenderci. E poi ci sono tutte i vari passaggi successivi, perché man mano che cresco qualcun altro vorrà investire su quella startup.
Esatto.
E il concetto è questo, no?
Esatto, e il concetto è questo, e ogni round, come diciamo, il round è ogni volta che si tirano su, tra virgolette, raise funds, ogni volta che si tirano su dei fondi. E ogni round ha delle caratteristiche diverse that we maybe can explain right now. So the first difference is clearly the phase of your startup. So what are your main goals at that stage? And according to that, you have different types of investors. Why is that? Mainly because of two reasons: the amount of money that you need and the amount of risk that the investor is basically needs to accept, let's say, in order to invest in that round. So when you have a pre-seed round, is basically when you have, it's, as I said, it's not a fixed structure, but that's the idea behind it. But you basically have an idea and you're just trying to see if it works. So you basically at the validation point, let's say, and you can have several types of validation. So validating means like also in the scientific method that you have an hypothesis that you want to test whether it's true or not. So you can test many different things. But mainly when we talk about validation in a startup, validation entails several types of validation. So for example, you can validate your market, your customer, your product, or even the idea or need. Let's say you have an idea, and before you even think of who your customer is going to be, you are just trying to validate and seeing if other people in the world share that same problem with you, or if you don't have it with the people that have it. So this is the idea of the pre-seed round. You're just trying to see if what you thought your startup is going to be is actually true or not.
Right. And I think, Davide, another big term that I usually, when you talk about startups, I always have in my mind the term pitch.
Yes.
I don't know if you can tell us a little bit more. What is a pitch? What is pitching in the startup world?
Yes. So a pitch. You actually talked about a pitch in your podcast previously. It's
I talked about the elevator pitch, which is the 60 seconds that you really need in order to introduce yourself to maybe the best person in your life. It could be an investor. It could be your next wife, let's say, in the elevator. And usually it's 60 seconds. And in America, it's very common to have this elevator pitch ready to be shut out when the opportunity comes up.
Yes. So basically the term pitch, it's a longer version of your elevator pitch. Or let's put it this way. The elevator pitch, it's the short version of your pitch.
Right. Okay.
And a pitch is basically a presentation of your company and all of the aspects of your company for a variety of reasons. But one of the most important scopes, and actually it suits it really well, this tool, the pitch, it's when you're trying to fundraise. So we talked before about fundraising. So you develop a pitch, which is a presentation of your company to a potential investor in order to convince him or her to invest in your company. But you can use it for a variety of cases. So, for example, you're taking part into a startup competition, and then you have to present your startup so that you can be evaluated and you can win the competition, ideally.
Yeah.
Or you can do the pitch, for example, also to a potential co-founder. So you say, for example, if I had an idea and I would say, hey, Mattia, I have an idea. This is my startup. Would you like to be my co-founder? Here's my pitch. I'm going to pitch it to you. And, the word pitch also became a verb in English, and actually also in Italian, because many people say picciare.
Sì, picciare.
Which basically means presenting something. So instead of saying I'm doing a pitch, you can say I'm pitching my company. So it became a verb.
Yeah, definitely. So you kind of present everything about your startup to mainly an investor. It could be a co-founder, so someone that's will share the startup path with you. So he will bring in maybe his work, his capabilities, and to help you out. I don't know, maybe you are the technical guy, and then you need someone who's doing the marketing side, the sales side of the product, no? So you join together in this startup, and you each of you will give something to the company, to the startup itself, right?
Exactly. Yes, that's the idea behind it. You can use the pitch for really a lot of cases, and maybe even to a bank. If somehow you need to talk to a bank, you can use the pitch to present your company instead of a business plan.
So can you tell me your pitch or something that could be, valuable because it's a real example of a pitch? Do you have something ready for us in terms of, I don't know, your own startup, let's say?
Yes. So first I have a couple of general tips on the pitch, but everybody from the startup world, this will sound like common sense to them because it's a industry-wide standard, let's say, but keep your pitch short. 5 minutes. There should be more than enough. And
5 minutes, you said?
Yes.
5 minutes. Okay.
It depends on who you're presenting it to, because if you're presenting it to an investor and it's not the first time that you meet with an investor, he's going to ask for a more detailed pitch. But the idea of the 5-minute pitch is that you should arouse the interest of the person from the other side, and try to say the most interesting parts about your startups so that you sparkle some interest in them, and then they ask you for a second, a third meeting, and they start evaluating you, right? So one of the structures that I like the most is one from actually an Italian startupper, one that I like the most, and his name is Marco Trombetti. And he basically says that you need, he was talking was referring to a written pitch, but I think we can use it also for a presentation. The first one is the problem. So you're just trying to describe the pain of your potential customer or user, let's say. And you're not saying in any way how you should solve this problem, because this is the next paragraph, which is the solution. So what you're trying to build to solve that problem and help the users to do so. The third is the market. So you need to give to the investor on the other side the idea of how many people have this problem and how much they're willing to pay to solve this problem. So, for example, if we think about Facebook, they have potentially the whole world as a market, right? But not all of them are paying customers to Facebook. So what is the market of Facebook? It's not just the number of people who are using Facebook, but their market is the number of people using Facebook. And they also should take into consideration that only a small part of them are actually paying to use their product, which basically are the advertisers, right? Yep. So that the investors understands, as I said, how many people have this problem and how much money in the best scenario are in the market. And, this is one of the most, let's put it this way, dynamic paragraph of this 5-paragraph structure, because as I said, you're trying to validate over the lifetime of a startup. So you need to change it accordingly, because you might discover that your analysis was wrong, and these are not the people, like the group of people has a different number of participants, let's say, in this market, or because you were offering it to the wrong market. Let's put it this way. So you completely change the market. And the 4th paragraph is the traction. So you're trying to show to the investors the result of your efforts. So although you don't have a ready product, how many people signed up? Let's say if you had a landing page, how many people follow you on social media? If you have a page, for example, how many people are commenting on your post? How many people are in your community? So it does not need to be a monetary amount. So we made this much money. If you're in a pre-revenue stage, this is an interesting term. Pre-revenue means before the revenue. So revenue is when you start selling and, cashing in some money. So if you're pre-revenue, that means basically that you don't have a ready product that you're able to sell. Right. So you're in a pre-revenue stage, and you cannot say how much money you made, because that will be zero. But it's not true that a startup that did not make a sale has a value of zero, let's say, because you can have many more KPIs. Well, this is another interesting term, key performance indicator, which basically means it's a fancy term to describe a number. Put it this way. So a KPI would, for example, be your followers on social media, for example. If you're trying to build a community, for example, you can say, I tried to build a community and already X people follow me on social media. So that would be a KPI. So a number that represents the result of your effort, let's say. Or you could say X people signed up for my let's say, newsletter about when the product is going to be ready, and you can use this. And this is the paragraph of traction, right? And of course, as you progress, the investor expects a different type of traction, right? So if somebody already funded you and you were not able to generate any revenue, there's a problem here. So it's also a very dynamic paragraph, because you need to change it according to the phase of your startup. Yeah. And last but not least, it's the team paragraph, because given the fact that most startups fail, given the fact that the startup changes a lot over the lifetime, the team is very important here, because you need to understand the problem that you're trying to solve, and B, have a solid expertise on how to build it, let's say. And C, last but not least, even here, you need to be ready for everything, right? That does not mean that if today your business plan or your pitch looks like this, in 20 days or in 2 years or in 5 years, it's going to be the same. But the importance is that you have a team with a variety of skills, that you can do most of the things internally, at least in the first phase. And also that they're ready to tackle everything that they're going to encounter in their life. Because, a product startup might turn into a software startup or into a service startup, let's say. So the founding team needs to be able to, let's say, sustain the shift, have a knowledge, and take good decisions even if the core of the startup changes.
Ok, guarda, mi piacerebbe ridirlo in italiano. Mi sono segnato 2 cose che hai detto, cioè mi sono segnato i 5 punti, che fondamentalmente sono quelli. Io ho un problema, la società ha un problema, c'è un problema da risolvere. Io ho trovato la soluzione. Quindi all'interno di questo pitch ti dico qual è il problema che c'è nella società o che c'è, nel mondo del business, ok?
Nel mercato.
Nel mercato. Poi
potrebbe anche non essere un mercato, nel senso che il mercato presuppone che qualcuno abbia trovato quel problema e lo stia già risolvendo in qualche modo, ma può essere benissimo che c'è un nuovo problema che non ha un mercato. Quindi tu hai un'idea, vedi questa cosa che succede nel mondo e quindi dici c'è questo problema e quindi lo descrivi.
Quindi nel mio pitch parto con il problema, gli dico qual è a questo fatidico investitore, qual è la mia soluzione, ok, di questa startup che come vorrà risolvere questo problema, gli spiego però ovviamente il mercato, quindi cosa c'è all'interno, cioè qual è il potenziale di clienti che sono all'interno che potrebbero essere interessati a questa soluzione di questo problema.
Come il terzo paragrafo, quello sul mercato.
Esatto, poi hai detto l'attraction. Esatto. E quindi devo dare consistenza, devo far capire che comunque ci sono dei KPI che io ho preso, che potrebbero essere semplicemente i follower sulla mia pagina, potrebbero essere semplicemente dei KPI che non siano letteralmente legati a una revenue o comunque a una vendita che ho già fatto di questo prodotto, perché magari è ancora in una fase in cui non sto ancora vendendo niente. E poi l'ultima è il team, cioè quindi le persone con cui sto costruendo questa startup, che hanno tutti delle diverse, competenze, e in funzione dei loro nomi, delle loro capacità, un investitore potrebbe sentirsi più tranquillo perché già conosce determinate persone di quel team, o c'è qualcuno che all'interno del team ha già fatto qualcosa in passato che è stato di successo, eccetera, eccetera. Correggimi se la mia descrizione, il mio recap in italiano è corretto o mi sono mangiato dei punti.
Abbastanza corretta. Aggiungerei 2 piccole cose sulla traction. Possiamo introdurre un nuovo termine molto usato anche in italiano, inglese chiaramente, che è product market fit. Quindi fit, come descriviamo fit? Una compatibilità, mettiamola così,
sì,
tra il prodotto che sto offrendo e il mercato. Ok? Facciamo un esempio molto assurdo, no? Dobbiamo comunicare in qualche modo, ad esempio in termini in tempo di pandemia, con delle persone anziane che sono a casa e non hanno nessun altro con loro a casa. La prima cosa che verrebbe in mente è: ok, diamo loro un computer e scriviamoci per email, o diamo loro un cellulare e ci sentiamo per WhatsApp, che sarebbe un product market fit perfetto per tanti giovani che hanno confidenza con la tecnologia, mentre nel caso delle persone anziane non c'è un ottimo product market fit, perché il mercato è quello di risolvere il problema della comunicazione con queste persone in tempo di pandemia, però il prodotto che noi stiamo dando a loro non ha una compatibilità perfetta, perché potrebbe avere problemi nell'utilizzarlo, quindi potremmo controintuitivamente ampliare questo problema, no? Quindi questo è il senso di product market fit: dare il giusto prodotto che permetta di risolvere il problema al mercato di riferimento. Quindi questo è per quanto riguarda il paragrafo di traction. E invece per il team, quello che abbiamo detto prima in inglese, lo ripetiamo in italiano: è molto importante che il team abbia delle skills specifiche per il progetto, magari esperienza nel settore o comunque compatibilità, tra quello che si vuole andare a realizzare, quindi il paragrafo solution, e quello che è lo skill set. Ecco, skill set, abbiamo usato skill e skill set, magari possiamo definirli. Skill sarebbero le competenze,
Certo.
skill set sarebbe l'insieme di competenze di ogni persona, quasi una cassetta degli attrezzi. E molto importante il fatto che il team deve essere in grado di adattarsi a quelli che sono i cambiamenti dell'impresa o della startup, come vogliamo chiamarla, in futuro. Quindi non solo deve essere ferrato su questo tipo di soluzione che sta al momento progettando, ma deve essere pronto anche a possibili evoluzioni di quella soluzione, mettiamola così. È una frase che mi è piaciuta molto, non ricordo di chi, però diceva: se stai cercando un co-founder, non devi cercare un buon co-founder, ma devi cercare uno 007, cioè dà l'idea di quella persona che sai di avere accanto e che qualsiasi situazione lui o lei si ritrovi sarà in grado di uscirne vincitore.
Uscirne vincitore.
Quindi questa è l'idea.
That's great, Davide. Thank you very much. I just would like to ask you, but where can we find you? I mean, you have your startup, which is Visafy, but also, I don't know, are you very active on LinkedIn? I don't know, on Clubhouse or somewhere else, on Instagram? And, tell us a little bit more your upcoming projects. If you are going to start another startup in the future, just tell us a little bit more about, your future projects.
Sure. So to your first question, the best place to find us, Visafy, it's basically writing our website, like our URL, which is visafy.it, visafy.it. And to find me and to have a chat with me, you can visit my website, which is davidelionetti.com, davidelionetti.com. And there you have all my social links, so you can hit me up on every social media. And I'm really eager to get to know your listeners. And if anybody has a question for me concerning the startup world or wants to have a chat, I will be very, very happy to have a chat with them.
And as usual, we always ask to our guests some tips on how to improve your English in general. Us as Italians, we heard that we should watch a movie in original language, or make it simple, take it simple, or study verbs or study nouns. What can you give us some tips from your perspective, because you have quite a very good English, and on top of, living abroad as well, because of course, if you're going to live abroad, you are surrounded by native speakers. It is much easier. But what about a professional guy or someone working in a company that wants to improve his English, the language skills? Let's say, what would be your suggestion, Davide?
So, one of the most overlooked way of learning a language, which we tend to forget as we get older and as we're adults, we hate not comprehending what's going on around us, right? Now that we are adults and we speak at least one language, hopefully, we get nervous if somebody is talking and we don't understand, right? But this is a very important starting point, because if you are not understanding, you're still doing an exercise. And you're doing the exact same exercise that you were doing as a kid, when you could not talk, you could not speak any language, but you were picking up the language from the other people, even if you didn't understand anything, right? So we tend to forget this as we get older. And one of the main tips is be okay with this feeling, and start being in places where you don't understand things and try to pick up what you're hearing, let's say.
Right.
Clearly, this is not all. So you need to start learning about the grammar, and you can find tons of materials online. And so I will skip, let's say, the conventional tips. So this is one of the first unconventional tips. The second, I don't know if it's conventional or not conventional, but it's watching content in the language that you would like to learn. So for example, you're trying to Google something or you're trying to search something on YouTube, just switch immediately everything you're searching for to English or whatever language it is. So you're trying to search, I don't know, for mathematics. I don't know, how to calculate integral, right?
How to cook pasta, how to cook carbonara, let's say.
Well, that you should check it in Italian.
That would be much better.
But if you're searching for something, search for it in English, because you're getting better results because there's a ton of material there, of course, if you're not searching for how to cook.
Yeah, of course.
And second, you combine learning about that topic with learning about the language, right? And so this is my second tip. My third tip.
So if you're interested about marketing, let's say you want to know more about marketing, just go and Google it or look for some content, video content on YouTube directly in English. There would be some expert that will tell you more about marketing as you're interested in marketing, but at the same time, you can improve your English at the same time. So that's a good point. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. And the third, and maybe the funniest one, is get a girlfriend or a boyfriend who speaks the target language, let's say.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's a great tip.
If he or she really loves you, he or she is going to explain all the terminology and stuff like that.
Let's say that this tip is for like if you are in between, let's say 15 years old and 30 years old, because
that depends.
Yeah, no, it depends, of course, but in general, it's just for youngsters. This kind of tip, find a boyfriend or a girlfriend that speaks the language you want to learn. Let's say.
If we, let's say, want to transform this tip for somebody, I don't know, who's married or who's not searching for a relationship.
Yeah.
A good idea would be to clearly find a friend who speaks the target language. And this is very important because when I was learning English before moving abroad, I mainly learned English at school, except for a couple of experiences abroad. And I was missing the colloquialisms between people that the textbooks did not transmit me, let's say, did not deliver me. So it's very important to combine theory, and theory is, textbooks and stuff like that, with practice. So learning how a native speaker talks, because sometimes it's different and you need that, especially if you need that for work, you need to learn how they speak so that you can also speak in a natural way, let's say, not in a textbook way. And you can also understand way of saying that are basically not listed on a book, for example. And in your podcast, you made many episodes where you explained with native speakers many words or sayings that were really unconventional. But why?
That's the idea behind. And I think this one was a great episode too, because we give the chance to other people to know more about startups in general, how that works, what is a pitch, and things like that. But at the same time, listening to Italians as well that are talking, having a conversation in English is helpful as well. So thank you very much for being with us today, Davide. I really appreciate this episode. I would like to remind to everybody that they can follow us. You can follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Telegram. We're almost everywhere. Okay, so if you want to get in touch with me, you can DM me on LinkedIn. We have the website praticamenteinglese.it. So we are everywhere, Davide. I have to admit that I opened, in this last year, I opened account almost everywhere, to make sure that Praticamente Inglese is on the web everywhere. Okay.
That's good. Mattia, thanks a lot for having me. It was such a pleasure to have a chat with you. And as I said, if anybody wants to have a chat about startups or whatever thing I can help with, please feel free to reach me. davidelionetti.com. You find all my social links, and let's keep in touch. Thanks,
that's Mattia. Great. Thank you very much, Davide. Thanks everybody for listening to today's episode. Have a great week ahead, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye. Ciao, Davide.
Ciao Mattia.